Madaula Misu.
Oh yeah. Big time. At long last, Devatron, welcome to Hollow Knight. Okay, so sorry for the delay in getting the voiceover going, but I didn't want to interrupt what I consider to be a pretty delicate intro to the game. You know, I think you'll agree. I mean, we start with an excerpt from an elegy, you know, and this is set to very sad, minor key, kind of minimalist piano music. Then we get a pretty harrowing cinematic that we don't quite understand yet, but that's followed by more sad piano and violin as we watch our, you know, our lonely little bug hero wander the dilapidated streets of some abandoned bug city. I mean, it's all just so, you know, melancholy and delicate, like I said, you know. And of course, all of this set against this very beautiful and captivating, but pretty dark, kind of somber, drab, hand-drawn, hand-painted, original graphic art. So I just wanted you to experience all of that, you know, in its pure form, the way the game presents itself to you, so that you would have a proper introduction to the sad, dark world of Hollow Nest and the tragic story of the Hollow Knight.
Oh, 登这次的。Choco, look at this.
Okay, so we got our first map, and we're just going to hop away from Cornifer's incessant humming and have a look at it. All right, welcome to the first of what I'm going to be calling a map break. And I have to do it this way because while I can show you the map within the game, I don't have access to any kind of pointer or mouse cursor or anything like that. So I'm not able to visually show you this is where we are and this is where we've been and we went this way and this is where we're going, etc. So I've had to do it this way, and all I've done is taken a screenshot of where we were right when we opened the map, and then I've opened that screenshot on my desktop using Microsoft Paint. And by doing that, not only do I get a pointer, but I get a paintbrush. So I can, you know, draw a line and say, hey, we went down here and then we had that fight there and, you know, etc. Now, Do I have to do this at all? It's a fair question. And I've watched a lot of videos of this game, and very few, if any, of those players ever open their map. And I think that's fine because they're good players, they know what they're doing, and their videos are about something else. And someone like me or other people that are going to be viewing those videos who have played the game a lot, we all know where that player is and where they're going and where they've been and what they're doing. So it's all fine. But for someone like you, on the other hand, who's never seen the game or played the game, and for a video like this, which is intended to be a very curated, bee burner master plan kind of enjoyable experience, I think that, yes, having the map, the break and immersion notwithstanding, is going to be incredibly helpful. I find that this game, especially when you're first exposed to it, is visually and spatially very confusing. It can be very overwhelming. And because it's Metroidvania and we have to oftentimes sort of circle back to an area that we've already been, and you start to see the same rooms, but you come to those rooms from different directions, it can just, totally fry your brain. So anything at all that we can do to minimize the confusion and to maximize you getting your bearings and having a nice understanding, a visual and spatial understanding of how, this room, looks in relation to this room, and this string of rooms in relation to where this, shaft was and where Dirtmouth is, etc. And, if we can establish that at all, then I think it's worth it. So that's why I decided to do it. Now, because of that, with very few exceptions, when I get to a new area, I will immediately head to Cornifer and buy the new map. And again, when you first play the game, you don't have the luxury of knowing where Cornifer is, and much of your time is spent, just going all over the place looking for him. You want that map more than you want to just explore the area at all. But that's all been taken care of for you because this is, Bee Burner's master plan. So that's the way we're going to do it. Okay, so as for the maps themselves, the first thing to note is the lines. Notice when we first buy the map from Cornifer, the lines are all kind of sketchy and fragmented. Once you get the quill, and you buy the quill from Cornifer's wife, Zelda, up in Dirtmouth, once you get that quill and then you've explored a pathway or a room or whatever, and then you're sitting at a bench and resting, what will happen is the lines will get filled in solid. And then the rooms that you've been in will become shaded in a color appropriate for the area. Each area has a different color associated with it on the map. Okay? And then the other thing that'll happen is, if you notice, like down here, right there, and then off to the left here, there's two off to the right here. There are little breaks in the wall that look like there might be a pathway, right? Looks like there's probably a pathway. So let's say we take this path and we discover that there's a room over here, and then, another path up to here, something like this. Again, once you have the quill and you've been through all of this and explored it, and then you're sitting at the bench and resting, the map will become updated. It's basically like you've, charted out this area, and then now that you have a moment to rest, you can draw it in on your map. So that's another fun part about the map in this game, and being able to show it to you, periodically throughout the playthrough, is that we're going to be updating it as we, get to new areas and fill out our map. Because the ones we get from Cornifer are all like this. They're incomplete. So it's also a very kind of fun part of the game. Another reason to include it. So as for right now, these our first map break and where we are, where we've been, where we're going. We started in Dirtmouth. This is where you start the game. Remember, you jump down. And then we talked to Elder Bug and sat on the first bench there and whatnot. And then we hopped down the well. Remember, we jumped down that well. And we took a left. About right here is where I started voiceover. And we entered this kind of tall vertical room with lots of little platforms and little bugs flying around everywhere. Got through there, and then over here was where we met Cornifer and bought the map, and then we ducked in here, and now we're having our map break. So this is where we've been. This is where we are right here. And moving forward, we're going to come down here and explore these rooms and head this way. And then over into here, down. And then we're going to head over into this uncharted area here, do a few things, make our way back up, and then kind of turn left back in and over here. Now, obviously, I don't want to tell you exactly what we're going to do encounter-wise, because that would just spoil the fun. But direction-wise, this is kind of the way we're going to be going, and you now know that, and you can keep it in mind as we move forward. Okay, so what are these mounds that we keep smashing and the little bits of rock that fly out that we collect? The little bits are called geo, and it's the currency for the game. How much you have is in the upper left, just below the string of white masks. And you get geo from smashing those little outcroppings as well as off of defeated enemies. Now, as for that string of little white masks, they kind of look like alien heads. Those represent your lives. And if you get hit by an enemy, or run into a pit of spikes, or fall in a pool of acid, whatever it is, you'll lose one life. And if you lose all of them, then you die. Now, I never actually show you a death, so you're not going to see it. So, accordingly, I don't really need to talk about how the mechanic works and all that. It's a good mechanic, but I'm just not going to talk about it here. Now, as for the big white circular mask in the upper left, that's actually a meter for a resource called soul. And think of soul as mana. It basically powers spells. And soul is white in color, and you'll notice our big circular mask is completely white, and that's because we're at full soul, or think of it as being at max mana. If we were to cast a spell, that white would drain away, and the big round mask would, gradually become gray. Now, the way to fill it back up and reacquire soul is to successfully hit enemies with your nail, basically your sword. It's called a nail in this game. And now there are a couple other ways to get soul as well, but they're kind of complicated to talk about. It's easier just to show you when we come across them. Now, as for the various spells throughout the game, I'll talk more about them as we acquire them, but we do start with the basic heal spell, and you may have already noticed I used it once. What happens when you get hit is you lose a life, and one of your little white masks turn gray. Well, what you can do is hold down the cast spell button, which for me is B, and it'll channel the white soul from the big circular mask and refill the smaller gray mask and make it white again, and thereby give you your life back. So that's how you heal. Alright, so our first boss fight, it's kind of a mini boss, but, the doors closed, the music changed, we had a title for her name, the Bruise Mother, so it's an official boss, and we did pretty well. You may have noticed those little bugs that popped out of its body. Those are called bruisers, and we had already encountered those earlier. And they're not too hard, but they're just annoying because they get in your way.
Oh, title. Oh, whoopa.
Okay, so looks like we rescued Sly, and the reason we came here to do that immediately is because he has a shop, like you mentioned, up in Dirtmouth, and we're going to need several things from him throughout the game, so it's important to get him free as soon as possible. Alright, so these big flying nasties, they're called aspid mothers, and the little guys that they kind of shoot out at you and that spawn once they die, they're called aspid hatchlings. And there are some other versions of aspids throughout the game, and they're all pretty hard, especially early on like this when you don't have a lot of platforming tools to get at them. So they can be trouble. Generally, anything that can fly and hover and be above you in this game that makes it hard to get at, that can be trouble, and you want to deal with it as quickly as possible. Okay, so some pretty nice platforming, and we saved a green worm. It was trapped in a glass jar, Devatron. Yeah, so those little guys are called grubs, and we don't know anything about him yet, but he seemed pretty innocent, and, you know, he was trapped. He seemed happy that we rescued him. And as for the platforming, when you bounce on obstacles with an attack from your nail, it's called nail tapping. You'll see it right there. See that? These enemies I have to nail tap from above because they have shields and they block the attacks when you hit them straight on. But yeah, nail tapping, it's not really hard, but if you're not used to it, it can be pretty awkward. So to go in there and nail that platforming perfect first try, that was great. It felt really good. Alright, so immediately another grub rescued. And as for some of these critters, the two guarding that grub, those were aspid hunters. That little fly that squawks at me that I just killed, that's called a venge fly. This little white crawler is called a tick-tick. And the little gray version of those crawlers, those are called crawlids. Alright, so the last stag, presumably a stag beetle, and with him a fast travel system.
Odolan. Nato.
¿Qué volen? ¿Más? Patmos, Gio.
Okay, so here's Sly's offerings at his shop back in Dirtmouth. I'll talk about these things more when we actually buy them. Initially, we need to buy the Gathering Swarm Charm, which costs 300 Geo. And notice we have 310, so master plan is big time. And we're going to immediately head over to the other shop now that it's open. And this is Cornifer's wife, Azelda.
Papa nada.
All right, so this is Azelda's offerings. Again, we don't have any geo left over, or not enough to buy anything, but it's all map stuff. The quill, the compass, various pins to mark things that you find along the way. So we will be getting back to her to buy some of those shortly. But for now, we're going to rest at the bench and then put on our new charm, the Gathering Swarm. And what this will allow us to do is we don't have to walk over and gather the geo. If it just sprays out all over the area after we kill an enemy or whatever, the swarm will kind of fly out there and pick it up and bring it to us. So this is a way we'll make more money because we won't leave any behind. All right, watch here. See those little white, they look like little white butterflies. Those are the swarm guys that kind of go out and get the geo and then bring it to us. So our Gathering Swarm charm in full effect.
Bamato churro.
So Coral, a fellow nail-wielding adventuring bug, a little bigger than us. He happens to be wearing kind of a mask-like thing on his head. So hopefully we'll bump into Coral some more and hear about his adventures down here in Hallow Nest as well. As for the Temple of the Black Egg, kind of a weird thing. We don't know what it is. It has some engravings on it. And you may recognize it. It was actually at the very end of the harrowing cinematic that the game opened up with. So we'll learn more about what it is later. I encourage you to go back and watch the cinematic again if you don't remember it. But that's what it is. Now that was a very big bug. That was called a husk guard, and it was guarding a grub that we were able to rescue. It was not really a boss, kind of a mid-boss. It had the special attack, the music changed, but definitely kind of a big deal there. As for the term husk, there are actually several species of husk enemies throughout the game, many of which we've already seen. The one that just sort of meanders about slowly, that's called a wandering husk. There's one right here with the horn coming out of its head that charges you. That's called a husk hornhead. One right here that will jump at you. That's called a leaping husk. There's also the husk bully and the husk warrior. Husk warriors carry the shields. You recalled them earlier. I had to jump and nail tap them from above. So several variations of husk enemies, and as the name would imply, there's something of kind of an undead bug or a zombie bug, if you will, because they're just a husk, right? Something has brought them back to life, or at least undeath, and is causing them to go mad and just blindly attack anything and everything. So you saw in the upper right there was a trapped grub, and we weren't able to quite make the jump over to the ledge so we could rescue it. And I wanted you to see that because that happens a lot in this game. It's Metroidvania, and there will frequently be something that you want to get at, another ledge or a pathway or a treasure chest, etc. But it's just out of reach, or there are spikes blocking your way or something. So that's going to happen a lot, and just get used to it. Keep things in the back of your mind. Once we acquire new platforming abilities or upgrade spells or get the right charm, etc., we'll be able to come back and re-explore areas and get at what we weren't able to get at previously. Well, 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 look at this, Devatron. It's the grub nest. So this is where the grubs go once we've rescued them. You'll notice the 3 that we've already rescued, and you'll also notice what looks to be like a lot of vacant cocoons. So there are likely a lot more grubs out there to be rescued. So we'll have to explore and try to find them all. As for the big guy at the top that was throwing Geo our way, he's called the Grub Father, and he'll give you a reward for each grub you rescue. It's almost always Geo, but every now and then, like the 10th one or the 15th you rescue, it's something special, like a charm or a crafting resource or a relic or something like this. So it's a very cool part of the game, and we'll be returning there frequently once we've rescued more grubs.
Papa nada.
오, 뒷자리.
So we bought the Wayward Compass charm from Zelda. We're going to equip it. I haven't really said too much about charms. Basically, they each have a notch cost associated with it. The bigger and better the charms, the more notches you need to equip them. You start the game with 3 notches, and there are ways to acquire more notches. But for now we have 3. The Wayward Compass costs 1, and the Gathering Swarm costs 1, and the Fury of the Fallen costs 2. So we can only do 2, and I chose to do the Compass and the Gathering Swarm. Fury of the Fallen just increases your damage when you're at 1 life remaining. So unless you're at 1 life remaining, it does nothing for you. So it's no big deal to have unequipped. All right, so here we are at the next map break, and the first thing you can notice is there's now an icon on the map for where we are. It looks like our little bug hero's head. And we get that from equipping the charm we just bought, the Wayward Compass. So we won't always be able to have that equipped and see where we are, but most of the time we will, and it's very handy. Now, the next thing you can notice is that the map hasn't been updated. The lines are still sketchy, no shading, no drawn-in areas that we've explored, etc. Recall that we need the quill in order to do that. And when we were at Zelda's, we only had enough money to buy the compass or the quill, but not both. So I chose to do the compass first, and we'll return there shortly to buy the quill. And from that point on, we'll be able to update all our maps, and they'll look nice. Okay, so as for where we've come from, remember we started in Dirtmouth, popped down through the well, took a left down this way, and then we met Cornifer here and bought our map. And then we popped into this room, and we had our first map break about here. From there, we went down and all the way to the right over here, and then into this unexplored area. And somewhere down in here, we rescued the shopkeep Sly. And after that, we popped up back over to the left, and down in here we found the stag station and took the stag back to Dirtmouth. Okay, from there we re-entered the Forgotten Crossroads through the well, but this time we went right, and we discovered the Temple of the Black Egg here. That's where we met Quirrell and talked to him. And then we went far right and saved the grub from the big husk guard. And we kind of backtracked, went down, and then we went all the way left through a series of rooms that aren't on the map yet, and they connected back to this big shaft. There was probably about, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 rooms along here. And again, they'll be drawn in once we have the quill. And then once we reconnected with this big vertical room, we went up and to the left, and we discovered the grub nest over here, with the grub father giving us our rewards, etc. Okay, after that, we went back up to Dirtmouth through the well, and then we took the stag back to the stag station down here, and then walked out, up, and over, and now we're here, okay? So moving forward, we're going to head left and explore this big room right here that has this kind of demonic icon, and then continue heading left, see if there's another room in this sort of sliver, and see also if this connects up to this room here where we previously met Cornifer. Okay, you notice there a big, long passageway with spikes on the bottom and the top. Too tight to try to nail tap. We would rebound off the bottom row of spikes and then end up hitting the top row. So, again, that looks like something that we're going to need some other kind of platforming ability in order to traverse, and we'll have to come back and do it later. All right, the False Knight, Devatron. Big time. Yeah, that's our first major boss, and you can see why it's called the False Knight, right? It has this big, bad set of armor and hammer, but really it was that wimpy little white maggot that had crawled inside who was pretending to be a big, bad knight. So that's fun stuff there. And he drops this city crest that'll allow passage into Hallownest capital city, so that'll certainly come in handy later. And also a big chest of geos, so good stuff there. And you may have noticed I didn't take any damage. Now that's not a very hard fight, and it's pretty easy to avoid damage, but don't get used to that. The bosses in this game are really hard for me, and I don't think I'm able to avoid damage on any other boss fight for the rest of the game. So I'm going to go ahead and point it out now while I can.
Bueno, nin mea. Bueno, nin mea.
All right, so we acquired our first spell, but we got tricked by the snail shaman. Let's try it out. Oh, yeah. Big time, Devatron. Yeah, this thing's going to come in very handy. It's just an obvious super advantage because now we can attack and kill our enemies from range. It's a great spell. I use it a lot. And again, we were tricked by the snail shaman. We have to clear out this ancestral mound of some foul beast. In exchange, for acquiring our first spell. But nothing we can't handle. So a pretty good trade, all in all. So the new little critter for this area rolling around right there, those are called balders. They're like little roly-poly bugs. And you'll notice on the left here, there's like a statue. It looks like a dragon head. Bam, right there. If you hit those, it releases soul, and then it finds its way to you and you absorb it. It's one of the only other ways in the game to acquire soul. And I forget what they're called, but they're scattered throughout the world, so you'll see me banging on those and refilling my soul. Now to the upper right here, it's this blue cocoon dangling from the ceiling. You may have noticed that in the intro as well. If you hit that, it releases these little blue bugs called life seeds. If you go kill the life seeds, you're granted these bonus lives, and you'll see them in the upper left, little blue masks in addition to all my white masks.
right, the foul beast is dealt with, Devatron. That was called an Elder Balder. So let's see what our prize is. The Soul Catcher. This is a very, very good charm. What it does is it increases the amount of soul that you get when you hit enemies with your nail. It has a 2-notch cost, so we're not able to use it just yet, but it's one of the ones I use a lot throughout the playthrough.
Oh, Louis Silva, huh?
So we've acquired our first spell, the Vengeful Spirit. And again, I can't say enough good about it. Very powerful, very useful spell. And even though the Snail Shaman kind of duped us into doing his dirty work, it's a very good trade indeed. Now, as for the Elder Balder, you may have noticed when I got close to it and attacked it with the nail, it just rolled up into a big ball, and its armor was so tough I couldn't damage it. So you really do need the Vengeful Spirit spell in order to beat those things. Because when you move away from it and you're at range, he opens up and he's vulnerable to attack. So you just do that. If you run out of soul along the way, you wait for him to spit out one of the little boulders and then attack it, thereby getting more soul from landing attacks, and then you can keep casting Vengeful Spirit until the Elder Balder is dead. Oh yeah, another Elder Balder down. And you can see we really did need that spell in order to beat him and move on to this next area, which looks to be pretty mossy and misty and grassy. Where are we going, Devatron? Find out in the next episode. We will see you next time for more Hollow Knight.